Burn the Box, a portal to the world of hidden truths and untapped power. A sanctuary where together we unmask the oppression hidden in the shadows far too long. Unscripted, unplanned, unrehearsed. Stay tuned for powerful conversations, thought-provoking insights as we ignite the sacred rebellion of the global majority. Let's begin this incredible journey together. Welcome to Burn the Box. Your host, Dr. Sonali Deepika.
Hello, and welcome to this edition of Burn the Box with the very talented Oceana Sawyer. Oceana is a grief and liberation explorer in the liminal spaces of life and death. And among her very many talents, she is a sensuality educator, which has led to us connecting on many occasions. Our first 15 minutes of this podcast got lost, and so you'll hear us now diving right in, and all of the details for Oceana's work are available in the show notes. Enjoy. All right, we're back. Mercury retrograde and this potency in the airwaves when people of color and culture try to connect, right, and share something
on joyful topics, not just doom and gloom. And
yes,
let's center white-bodied supremacy and talk all about that for an hour. Which I'm glad there are people who do that. It's just not necessary here.
I know, because we've created space. We've talked about being in our bodies and working with what's there so that we can create space.
Yeah. And it's funny because when we got kicked off a few minutes ago, I was just acknowledging you, how easy it is to be in conversation with another femme presenting person who's in a body of culture. You would actually feel them in their bodies and what that makes available in terms of how we talk about being embodied, being sensual, being alive, having liberatory experiences. That was too much, I guess, for the internet, but we're gonna give it a try again. Here we are. Because where I was going was, that post I had up on Instagram a couple of weeks ago, I swear I had it was the last straw. I'm watching by societal standards, beautiful, biracial, overeducated, femme presenting person talking about the sensuous. And that's as far as I'm going to go with that, because I don't really want to get in a toe-to-toe with that person. Because it wasn't just them. They were just the latest example of so many people who talk about the sensuous, who talk about sensuality like it's going to save us. But they're talking about it in such an intellectual way, in such a cognitive way. And you can see what they're doing. They're trying their best, which is not a bad idea, to reach the dominant culture, the white cisgendered male part of the dominant culture, or maybe bypass the salaciousness of cisgendered men. When you start talking about sensuality, they go to objectifying femme presenting Black and brown bodies immediately, the exotification of us. So you could see that they're working in that conversation as they're talking about the sensuous.
Yes.
And even though they're talking about the sensuous in terms of the senses, still, we live in this culture that has long, hundreds of years of history around the senses. Anything that feels good is suspicious. That mode of addressing that, I feel like again, I'm glad there are people who do that and they can do it far better than I. But on the other hand, I feel like that conversation is so important for us and how we're going to make our way through these times.
Yes.
So to have this access to what feels good in our bodies and how do we access what feels good and use that as fuel for our journeys forward.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, this
Yeah.
is what I love.
Like that.
This is what I love about connecting with you. And we've had so many discussions around this, but to me, also, it's such a bigger topic. And I appreciate your reflection of, oh, I like to sit with you if you feel embodied, because I was not embodied by far most of my life. It was very intellectual, and any understanding of the body was very intellectual. Yeah, like studies I'd done, things I'd done, even different practices, with like meditation, yoga, those kinds of things. It wasn't until like these last few years, maybe 6 years ago, where I gave myself like that permission to really dive into the sensual, the erotic, but and in doing so, connecting to the body and accessing what I've been thinking about lately. What lights me up is this idea of our life force energy, like connecting to that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which to me of this whole idea of burning boxes, like it goes far beyond the erotic or what do we look like or what are we, even like whatever it is, sexual techniques and all of that. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's like a larger perspective, I think.
You just brought in the erotic, which, as you say, is such a bigger field than how we generally talk about it. You even alluded to how you look and all this, and that is such a superficial, in my mind, playground of the erotic when it is so much bigger and deeper and richer to go in the direction of Audre Lorde. How the
Yes.
erotic is really just what brings life, what is
Mhm.
primal, primordial, at the ground of being life. And
Mhm.
people in femme bodies, all bodies have access to this, but I think there's a particular way that having a womb space is like a dark primordial place to settle into in this conversation about what is the erotic. All kinds of bodies have access to this. You don't have to have a womb to have it,
Mhm.
to have access. But I'm just noticing because I have one. So that's a place that I can sink into
Right.
easily. So I will just leave it at that. I've got one of those. So I'm just going to sink in there like right now. Then the sinking into that primordial womb space, hanging out there, because I can do that at will. And that's the thing I really want to talk with us about is this is available at will. You don't need special baths or candles or crystals. It is available at will. I'm
Yes.
having it right now.
Hmm.
And that's all that
Hmm.
there is to do. From there, you can do whatever you want from there. So from
Yeah.
here, I'm just going to continue relating with you and see what bubbles up because I'm in the zone.
Right.
And already I can see my lips are redder, my cheeks are redder. I have that look that makeup is trying to reproduce, but I'm just having it naturally because I'm in
Oh,
that zone.
yes.
And that's the zone
Yes.
everybody wants to be in.
Yes.
that because it's where life starts. It's where life is, where life is happening. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to deny it. It's also very scary because we all know we have lifetimes of stories about what happens to us when we walking down the street, feeling away, feeling good, and we get grabbed, we get attacked, violence ensues. And so we learn from our mothers, we learn from our sisters, we learn from the media to close that down. But I'm just here with you. And anybody who's listening, if you're in a safe place, just come here with us. Come and sit in this place just for this time. You don't have to be out in the world being all turned on and in your life force energy. But right here, if you're in a safe place, just come here. Come with us. Settle in. Settle into this pool of juicy aliveness because this is the source of creativity, of wisdom. This conversation just changed. The trajectory of this conversation just changed because I settled in. And then you, Sonali, settled in with me. And now we are together because we have practiced this. This is like Dharma. This is not something we just thought of and just, okay, we can just go there. This is a practice we have trained, we have researched, we are in this zone because we've been in this zone many times and it's familiar and we can go there. And so we are here together and anything is possible from here. And anybody who's listening or watching, you can come too. You come to the extent that you can also know what's available is more. And I can tell you from my point of view, and I know it's true for Sonali, even this is just a fraction of where we have been, where we can go. So we're just sitting here in this sort of very alive, juicy, I will say turned on, connected to the erotic. And in this place, we start to imagine what's possible for us. And you're here with us too, imagining what becomes possible from here. And I just feel like for me now in this conversation is what does liberation look like from here? What would it, to use the sensual, right? What would it taste like? What would it smell like? What would we see? What would we touch? And here I want to say part of this inquiry also is I want to make a case for being deliberate. Yeah, we dropped into this zone, but I had deliberately created a space for it to happen. And how did I do that? I put on not just any old piece of clothing, I put on velvet. Why did I put on velvet? Because you know what? Velvet feels good to the touch. It feels good to my skin, even on the inside of it. This garment hanging on me, good to my skin. It's giving me pleasure to wear it. It's reinforcing this idea that pleasure is available as I'm having it in just this garment. I'm sipping on a coffee that I made earlier and reheated because sipping it tastes so good. And one of the reasons it tastes so good, by the way, this is some local Ethiopian coffee. Some folks came over from Ethiopia. They were drinking this Seattle-based roasted coffee. And like, oh no, oh no, what? This is not real coffee. Let us go back to the motherland, get some beans, and roast it the way it's supposed to be roasted. And then, we'll see. Yeah, the coffee is supposed to taste. And that's the coffee I'm drinking, okay? I got a candle lit. I'm really grooving on your background, your hair, your smile, your skin, my head wrap. There's all these visual
Yes.
cues around what can feel good. And then from here, it's what do we imagine about our liberation? And I can tell you one thing that I feel right now that's bubbling up, and it came out of our training with Resma, is spaciousness, like the
Yes.
pause. That's one
Yes.
thing about living a sensual life is you understand that there's no place to get to. If you're trying to do the sexual thing where you're going for the big orgasm, the big splash, that's a efforting, you have a goal, you're just trying to get someplace. But in a sensual realm, there's no place to get to because it's all happening right here, right now, because we say so. It's all happening. So that spaciousness, that field of spaciousness that would come up whenever, like Resma would say, pause.
Yes.
Yeah. Because it's getting very intense.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, it's getting alive. It's getting, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
something's happening. And that pause is a way to just really feel into and have the moment and let the
Mm-hmm.
moment inform you about what wants to happen from here, what is emerging. And maybe that's it. It's like what the dropping in, the settling into the body, into a sensual, spacious
Yes.
field allows is for you to actually see what wants to emerge. The next life enhancing, life fulfilling, life affirming thing, what wants to happen next. Because that's
Mm-hmm.
just the universe. Now I'm gonna go back to the deep time story that we were talking about before we got kicked off, which is that's one reason why I like locating us in the deep time story,
Yeah.
because the universe is a very big and vast place, and it's happening right here through us right
Mm-hmm.
now in this conversation, through you, whoever is listening. The universe is already unfolding through you, through this moment that we are all in
Mm-hmm.
together. And all there really is to do is to notice it. And if you notice it, then you can be a part of directing it, but noticing where it's going and where you are in that flow. The way that you direct it is just simply with your attention.
Mm-hmm.
I think attention is a powerful thing.
Absolutely.
And of course, attention
Absolutely.
involves all of your senses. So attention is a very sensual act.
Yes.
And I think we just don't use it as well as we can. And it's
Mm-hmm.
infinite, just like the universe. So, yeah, I think that
Yes.
this sort of just being with a moment, being with the universe unfolding through our black and brown bodies, being in the slowness and the spaciousness that is already there. I think urgency is just white supremacist capitalism, takes us out of what is actually happening, which is the slow unfolding. And we can add our attention, we can add our deliberateness, and we can start to create our liberatory lives, a liberated
That's right.
life.
That's
That, if
right.
I'm honest, like in this place we dropped into, it's ooh, it's having my hands in the earth. It's paying attention to what is alive and enlivening and supporting life, and maybe not so much attention on the stuff that is deadening and contracting and pushing down life and opposed to life,
Mm-hmm.
because that's just going to be there. We can choose
Mm-hmm.
where we have our attention. Patricia Hersey talks about that all the time. That's practically in at the bottom of all of her messages, which is around take your attention back from grind
Oh,
culture. Our people
yeah.
did not sacrifice and labor and work so hard for you and I to get to these places in order for us to continue the game of suffering. That's not what my mother meant for me. I know that's not what yours meant for you. So, what did they intend? Let me talk about my mother for just a minute. She's on the other side, and she's still with me. But one of the things I saw unfold in our relationship over time was I could see that she had these pictures about what a successful Black woman would look like. And I know you have the same pictures, right? Lawyer, doctor. I was supposed to be a lawyer and
Absolutely.
a senator, have my name on some corporate nameplate on a door, corner office or something. And I tried to go down those rows. These rows, we went down these rows,
Yes.
both of
Yes.
us,
Yes.
and we saw where they led. And
Right.
it was almost like, Mom, I see what you want from me, and I can't get it there. I know you don't get that, understand that right now, but I'm just going to do this thing over here. I'm going to do me. And fortunately, my mother had enough grace and wherewithal. She did not stop bugging me about how come you don't have a job, and maybe you should go back to school. She did not stop bugging me about those things, but she did always give me space to say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm doing this. And she would go, all right, we'll see how it turns out. And when it turned out, she was like, oh, okay, I see you. And over time, I had enough successes with the path I had chosen, successes by her standards, which were I wasn't starving. I
Right.
was reasonably actually well off. And success by my standards, which was how happy and content and in my body and
Mm-hmm.
present am I, and having the wealth of relationships. Those are my standards for success. By both of our standards, towards the end of her life, we could both agree that this actually turned out. This is working. This is here. Take all my money and
Mm-hmm.
continue on. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, again, going back to my mother, she herself was given these very narrow, she was getting very specific pictures of what success looked like.
Yeah.
And of course, she would want her children to follow. Those are the pictures she had, those are the pictures she passed on. But I think our parents and our ancestors, I know the ancestors were like, okay, yeah. Because when my mother died, they said to me, oh, you're not supposed to follow in your mother's footsteps, right? Your job is to carry us forward. And that's a very different
Mm-hmm.
thing in someone's footsteps. And I
Yeah.
think our ancestors and the generations behind and forward understand that for each of us is to manifest a dream of
Mm-hmm.
aliveness, of
Mm-hmm.
abundance. That is at the bottom what any of the people in our lineages would want for the
Mm-hmm.
next generation. It's why you
Mm-hmm.
create the next generation. The creating the generation
Mm-hmm.
is actually a granting or a claiming of hope that it
Mm-hmm.
will be better. And I'm contributing the person, the being, the juice, the aliveness that will perhaps make it better. And you can't know what the better is until it manifests itself. So I think that's what there is in this like zone we have dropped into, where it's just grooving in the life, in the juice of turn on is what is the thing that's gonna feel the best next?
Mm-hmm.
What is the next
Mm-hmm.
most yummy, alive thing that wants to manifest even in this moment, that wants to come and just usher that in? And I don't think, of course, this is not a path for everyone, and I do think you can do both. I feel like part of the work I'm doing living here on the ground on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington after spending 2, 3 years virtually, a little bit disembodied, but coming back into my body with all these practices. But now I live among people, and I've been vaccinated
Mm.
many times, and I even had my very mild bout of COVID. But I live among people, and I live on the ground, and I live on the earth now, and I feel like part of my spot, because we all have our spots to play. One of
Yeah.
my spots is to be the visionary, is to be the dreamer, and also do the work. Like right now, we're trying to figure out how to feed ourselves. Because in 2020, white folks was like, oh, reparations, let us give you food from our farms. All this food was coming. And now in 23, it's, oh, we're done with that. So
Oh,
we're going to go
gosh.
back to the, oh, okay. So this year we're finding out that these free CSA boxes we were getting are not going to be so full this year. And so now there's a scramble
Mm.
around how are we going to feed ourselves, feed each
Mm.
other, us black and now the
Mm-hmm.
white folks are done with reparations. Okay.
Oh
Honestly,
gosh. That.
who did not see that coming? That's just wrong. I wasn't here in 2020. I was not living in this particular place, and you could just see that coming.
Hmm.
But another one of my kin, Velda, said she called a gathering. She said, "Okay, we're not going to get the same amount of food this year in the boxes because of money funding got cut or whatever. That's fine. We're going to get together and figure it out. Let's create something new, or at least new here." And that's another kin in my space, right?
Mm.
Who is deeply embodied, who does Watsu and body work,
Oh,
right? I had a whole
love
journey
that.
back to the Atlantic Ocean in the pool, the Watsu pool with this one a couple of months ago. So I know all about the power of them. But this same
Mhm.
being, the same person said, well, let's get together and think of some other way. And out of that has come community gardens. Out of the juiciness of our aliveness and our refusal to play in white bodied supremacy, we have created a structure in which we all are feeding ourselves in our gardens. We are feeding one another through our gardens. And some of us are gardening for the first time. Raised beds, okay, I can grow something. And
Yes.
let's growing strawberries for everybody. And we're growing collards and kale, apparently. and
Oh, wow.
so different people are growing different things. And
Yes.
we're feeding ourselves out of this creativity that comes from a willingness to spend time in dark womb space, dark spaces in any bodies, because it wasn't just femme bodies who were at that gathering, there were male bodies too. But we all like just drop, some of us more than others. You just drop into a zone and just see what's
Yes.
possible. It's like you figure out physically on the ground a way to feed yourself, but you're also visioning the ways that vision for collective gardens could even have a space to live in. It's because myself and maybe a couple other people had already imagined. Wouldn't it be great if we had our own sovereign community that was self sustaining, self determining for us, by us, about us, and the surrounding white community could come and play, help if they act right? They can come play, but we don't need that. We don't need you.
Yes.
We are
Yes.
doing this out of our own
Hmm.
aliveness. That imagination, that will to gather, that way of generating new solutions, that comes out of a body, a person who's already spent time
Yeah.
cultivating their aliveness, their embodied aliveness. I know that about Velda. I know that about you. I know that about me. And these are the people that I play with because together we can create more aliveness among our people. And maybe it arise in a way of, ooh, can we really do that? Because I can see the folks in the town going, can we really do that? I don't know. It's going to go along with it. But that's okay. There's enough people who can see that it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
enough.
Oh, thank you for sharing all of that. As I felt really dropped in with you, I was feeling into that womb space and the possibilities and the process of expansion and contraction, which is just something I've been recently even like, wow, we like the expansiveness when we get into a contracted heart or of what we're trying to birth, just being with, because the expansiveness comes again from that. It's really
Yeah.
coming through.
I liked how you named both because that's the discernment and the maturity to know that it's not going to be all expanded consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
expand, juiciness, and all that. It
Mm-hmm.
can be,
Yeah.
but even in the process of that kind of expansion of life, of sensation, of pleasure, there's always going to be like a natural ebb and flow. And then the game becomes how much time you spend in the ebb, how much time you spend in the contraction versus how much time you spend in the expansion and the flow. Because there's going to be both. You need to have that. The universe itself is always, it's seeking to generate, it moves towards what it's attracted to, what's going to create more life, something more light emerges, and there's more and more, and then there's a course correction. That's homeostasis. You have to have that. And actually, before there's more and more, there's like some kind of cataclysmic event, right? There's a contraction, and that's the homeostasis. It seeks to, because it's not just a matter of creating, generating, feeling more. At some point, you want to stabilize that, like really love that, lean into it and experience it and slow it down, have the pause, which can look cataclysmic. Oh, something broke down, like the internet. But it wasn't
Yes.
that, because what that generated, that cataclysm, that breakdown, that contraction, was it enabled us to start where we just like where we left off,
Right.
because we included that as part of the flow. We included that contraction. Okay, like that happens. Mercury
Yeah.
retrograde, okay? And now we just pick up where we left off and go on.
Yeah.
Nothing bad has happened. It was just a contraction. And that happens
Mm-hmm.
like all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the trick becomes, if you can be with the contraction and then just pick up where you left off and go
That's
for
right.
more. That's all there is. That's all the
Mm-hmm.
universe is doing. That's all
Mm-hmm.
anybody could do, is to pick up where
Mm-hmm.
you left off. That's just
Mm-hmm.
how you have an ever increasingly pleasurable experience in a moment in a life. Is you
That's
take a
right.
pause, you stop, you have a sip of water, and then you go back to
Mm-hmm.
where you were, and you just go
Yes.
for more. That's all.
Yes.
You just go higher.
Yes.
I think that to acknowledge the contractions is been so precious or so generative in the
Mm-hmm.
work in somatic abolitionism,
Mm-hmm.
is that you use those moments of contraction as fuel, because it's just energy. It's just energy now
Yes.
that's bound up. Oh my God,
Right.
they said that. Oh my God, that happened. Oh my God. So that's just life energy in the form of excitement,
Yes.
because you made a value judgment about what happened. And don't get me wrong, real shit goes down. Uh, and then
Right.
you have whatever value judgment you have about it, that's fine. It's just energy. You could then do this Aikido move with, if you metabolize it with all the toys that we
Mm-hmm.
have. That's just energy then that gets freed up to use for your life,
Mm.
generativity. And yeah, and I think
Yes.
that's like, I've read, I don't know, I wish I could remember who said this, but I read someone recently who said, what is liberation to them? Their definition of liberation was the ability or the capacity or the wherewithal to create whatever it is you wanted to create freely, to have the freedom to
Mhm.
create. You can see in that definition that they're making a distinction about people who are enslaved, who don't have the agency to create whatever it is they want to create, versus people who are not enslaved or people who are free who can create that. That's one of the things about how so many of us who have been colonized or enslaved, or if you're in a femme body, just perpetually dominated by patriarchy, there's a story around all the limitations that have been placed on us. And again, I'm not doing a bypass here. Those limitations are real.
Yes.
Like with the food situation here, it's not that you go into fantasy thinking about, well, I'm just not going to spend any time on the food situation. I'm just going to act like I have plenty of food. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is to notice it, to be with it well enough, but you don't have to spend the rest of your life there. You're just going to, but you have to really be with it.
Yeah.
It's like what we say, it's like you don't want to bypass a moment of activation. You want to be with it though well enough that you metabolize it so you it becomes something that you can use. It goes from
Yeah.
dirty pain and becomes
Mhm.
clean pain, something that heals you
Mhm.
and fuels you. But you do
Mhm.
have to be with it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back to what I said before, which is then it becomes just a matter of how much time. Because this is one of the things I read in my grandmother's hands is there is a point at which you are fixated on what's wrong. And if you've gone beyond the healing and the metabolization, now you are just stuck. There is that place too. You're just in a familiar story. You're just stuck in
Yeah.
the wrongness and the badness of it. That's the discernment. That's
Mhm.
the place where you have to practice. How much
Yes.
time? When do you start to notice in your body that, oh, something just shifted here? So to notice those shifts in the body and be able to then flow with those shifts, that takes practice and discernment. And that takes
Yes.
spending enough time, I would say, in your aliveness, in a body that feels good, to know the difference between what actually feels good. Not because it's supposed to, you're wearing the right clothes or you're having the right moment, you're out in the right club and the right music. No, but it actually does feel good in your body. You know
Yeah.
that. You can
Mhm.
feel that
Mhm.
because you
Mhm.
can have that at will. You're
Mhm.
having it,
Mhm.
you could be having it right now, like we are,
Yes.
because you decide.
Yeah.
So having that discernment, having that intimate knowledge of what actually feels good in your body allows you to know when something, an elicitation, an activation around white supremacy or patriarchy has come into your field and it's got you contracted, but you rock, you hum, you drop in, you resource yourself with the joy and the pleasure that's available. You get some knowledge, you be with long enough, and then you feel the shift in your body. You feel that contraction open up, loosen up, and you name that. And now you have, as we've been saying over and over, now you have information.
Yeah.
You have possibly even inspiration. You can hear
Yes.
the ancestors. You can remember a passage you read in a book. You can remember somebody,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
and you go, oh, yeah, that
Yeah.
thing. I could do that.
Yeah. And maybe you have spaciousness, like you mentioned earlier, or maybe you have expansion, like we were talking about. I appreciate the attention to the contraction. I think there's a tendency, and I've experienced it from me, of wanting to resist that contraction. And that tends to make it much more than it actually is, rather than having the discernment, leaning in and allowing it to metabolize, shift, move through it. and get back into what feels really good.
Yeah. We all have the same conditioning to go the opposite direction, to reach for the
Yes.
easy fixes, more potato chips, more
Yeah.
chocolate, binge watch some Netflix. Which
Oh, yes.
is not wrong or bad in and of itself. It just takes practice, that leaning in, don't you think?
Hmm.
It just,
Hmm. Yes. Absolutely.
you can't know until you've
Absolutely.
actually had the experience of it shifting. And you have to have
That's
that
right.
many times before you trust it. The first couple of times you
Absolutely.
think, okay, that was a fluke. Okay, I got out of that. Okay, that turned out. But maybe next time, I don't know. So you have to have that
Hmm.
experience of dropping in, being contracted, turning a contraction
Hmm.
around into expansion
Hmm.
many, or, well, I don't know, many times or a few times, depends on you. Enough times
Right.
that
Right.
you get it, like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I got it. Oh, it's
Yes.
like when I was training in sensuality, it wasn't like I had a couple of sessions and knew that, okay, I can be in a state of orgasm whenever I choose. Like, I kept hearing that, and I thought,
Hmm.
oh, that's great. If, someday somebody will do that, or I will do that. And, I had that experience a couple of times, but it wasn't until I had that experience like dozens of times that I really got that, oh, I
Hmm.
can do that. It's actually available to me easily.
Hmm.
Oh, it's like what Trisha Hersey says. It's a love practice, this resting as reparations, this resting, this liberatory practice of resting, self, not self-care, but just really taking the space for your nervous system, for your body to heal, regenerate, and dream new futures.
Hmm.
That is a practice that you have to spend
Yes.
time in over and over. It takes discipline, and you won't get there overnight. You just got to stay in it. And it takes the time it takes. I'm not even going to say how
Yeah.
much time it takes for
Yeah.
myself or for you or for anybody. It just takes the time
Yeah.
it takes.
It
But
does.
that's not bad either. I mean, that there's grace in that pursuit of getting the
Hmm.
reps in, as Rachel says.
Hmm.
It's even like
Yes.
using the toys, that the somatic
Toy.
abolitionist toys that he gave
Yes.
us. You
That's
can,
right.
the first few times you confront a racial bit of trauma and do the Vimbasi, do the rocking,
Hmm.
do the humming, do the
Hmm.
witnessing with other people in a
Hmm.
triad. The first few times you do it, it feels awkward. You don't know if anything
Hmm.
really happened. Did that
Hmm.
work? But then over time you notice, actually I do feel better.
Hmm.
Actually, I got a bounce in my step. I can think some things now. I can remember some stuff my people told me. I can feel joy. I can dance. I can get
Yes.
creative. I can get innovative. But the first few times you do, I remember the first 6 months I was in that work. I feel like I was just going through the motions. I hope this stuff is working. Maybe it is. And then all of a sudden I remember the moment when I noticed I do have more space to be
Ah.
with white body supremacy. I do have more space to be with the joy of my kin. I do
Yes.
have more agency to choose. Yeah, you know what? I'm not
Hmm.
going into that meeting. I'm not gonna go. I know how that's gonna turn. I'm not going there. Other people can go there. I'm choosing life. I'm choosing me. No, but that took time. And that was
Hmm.
a practice. But even that journey was delightful. It itself was delightful. The time I spent with my first triad is still sacred space. And even the hard times I had with other succeeding triads, those were all spaces that I grew, and they were hard in the moment, but even those I knew that's hard for a reason.
Hmm.
Like a particularly deep, embedded, chargy piece here I'm working on. This horizontal movement
Absolutely.
among us.
Absolutely. Yes.
And it has a lot of
Yes.
heat. And it's going to
Yes.
be like that. It's not all going to be rainbows.
Yes.
Hello.
No,
Oh, our
no.
triad is so wonderful. We feel so good. No, it's not like that. Sometimes you have to be
No.
in the harder places to work the deeper, harder stuff.
Yeah.
But each one of those parts of the journey where you met it, you went through it, and you got to the other side. Oh, the glory of that. It's just, there's nothing like it, really.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm feeling that, what you were talking before about attention and discernment, and practice is a big part so we can know what this is. So we can get to understand, oh, this is something that's showing up, and there's going to be the other side of it. Allows for more spaciousness and freedom, liberation.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that people think they're going to get stuck there.
Yes. Yes.
And sometimes I know I have spent way longer in a piece of work than I had wanted to. And it was
Yeah.
many days and weeks of
Yeah.
discomfort. Whenever I felt that stuckness, I would recognize my feeling like, oh, I'm stuck, as a reason to go lean in harder, lean in deeper, drop deeper.
Yes.
People think that they're going to go too far and they're going to be a point of no return. That could happen. But my experience with myself and with others is mostly people go only as far as they can go anyway.
That's right.
If you're going there, that is where you can go. You are
Mm.
prima facie, you're there. So that must
Mhm.
be where you can go because you are there. And so that means you have the capacity to go there, you have the capacity to get out.
Yeah,
And you might need help. And while you're there, you might figure out what is the help that you need, and you will get it.
that's right.
And then you will go on.
So
Yeah.
true.
I just had this thought. I don't even know if I want to go there, but I feel like
Okay.
even if where you go is you kill yourself, that is where you were meant to go. That is your journey. That is your life path. And to avoid those dark places is to avoid what was meant for you in this life. And you
Mhm.
can do that. And we all know what it looks like when we avoid the hard places. It looks
Yeah.
like this life that's numb, or it's just like drifting through it aimlessly, avoiding more
Yeah.
bad,
Yeah.
avoiding more stuckness. We're
Mm.
hovering. It's that real feeling of just
Mm.
like hovering through life, not really touching
Mhm.
down into anything. We're
No.
staying afloat. And that staying afloat
Yeah.
is just that. You are just
Yeah.
afloat. But if
Yeah.
you drop down below the surface, if you let yourself fall, you let yourself drown, you can touch bottom. And when you touch the bottom, you have something then solid to kick yourself back up. But until you get to the bottom, you don't have anything hard enough to push yourself back up with. So you're just
Mm.
hovering at the surface. My experience having grown up around a pool, I would jump into the deep end. And the first thing I would do was like swim as fast as I could to the bottom because I knew once I got to the bottom, I could push myself back up faster than if I got afraid and turned around and started trying to swim back up to the surface to get that air.
Ooh, yeah.
So that takes longer and it takes more effort. If I could just trust my air supply long
Mhm.
enough or have enough faith that I could get to the bottom and then push myself back up, and then I would arrive back at the
Mhm.
surface with the capacity to take the next breath of air. That is
An
a
analogy.
knowing that is a skill that takes practice.
Mm-hmm.
You might try that a few times and be like you barely got to the surface in enough time to take that breath. But that's okay. You still made
Yeah.
it. That counts. Yeah. It's a different experience than just hovering on the surface in your little
Mm.
floaty toy.
Yes.
It's a
Yes.
much more alive experience.
Yeah.
I had a teacher who said, the truth is, the moments when we're the most alive are the moments when we're facing death, the possibility
Mm.
of not alive. Not that I'm
Yep.
asking for people to do extreme things, but it is one idea that gives a little permission to stretch yourself,
Mm-hmm.
try, push your boundaries to go
Mm-hmm.
further than you imagine that you could go.
And to be embodied, right? To be in our bodies, experiencing
Hmm.
the full range of what's available to us, what's there.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that moment of wherever you're playing at your edges, at
Yeah.
the edge of what you think is your capacity, that's a moment
Yeah.
of aliveness. That's a moment
Yes.
of
Yes.
where you're exceeding a previous boundary. That's how you grow. That is just
Yeah.
literally the definition of growth is reaching a boundary and then going a little bit further and or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's perfectly fine too to
Mm-hmm.
play at the stay at the edge. Maybe you're one of those people that's always
Mm-hmm.
pushing and going further and further, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and that's fine too. But
Mm-hmm.
maybe what your edge in that moment is to just be with the edge, just hang out,
Yeah. Yeah.
and using your attention to just really feel. What's it like to be in this moment of tension? That's also a
Mm.
way to expand your capacity to experience your world.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you so much. This is always so good. Like I said earlier, the super sensual succulence I was experiencing before we even dropped into this conversation. I appreciate you so much. I wonder if there's anything you want to share about where people can find your work and delve more into your world and your words.
I have the book, Life, Death, Grief,
Yes.
and the Possibility of Pleasure,
There we
which
go.
if you Google that, or there'll be links in the show notes about where to buy it.
Yes.
I never send anybody to Amazon. There, you can buy
Mm.
it from me. You can buy it from an independent bookstore, but yeah, there'll be links. And I don't have any public offerings coming up. All my work
Mm-hmm.
now
Mm-hmm.
pretty much happens in the Rooted Global Village, which you've
Yes.
been on the wait list for that. And from time to time, that opens
Excellent.
up the Rooted Global Villages. The co-founders of that group is Corrine Bell, coming out of somatic abolitionism, or one of the spaces that we met her in.
Yes.
So that's a very much alive playground I enjoy.
Mm,
And
yeah.
yeah, that deep time study with African diasporic bodies that's happening in that space. Yeah.
Mm, beautiful. Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. Always fun.
It's always so good.